A day doesn't go by where I sit and look at stereo gear online. I want that. I want that.
Hello and welcome to episode 37 of When Records Ruled, the podcast where we share our love of rock music and pop culture from the 70s and 80s and take a few B-side tracks down memory lane along the way. I'm your host, David Norris, and joining me on this flashback musical road trip are my good friends Brian Strom and Lance Schwartz. Fellers, how we doing today?
Terrific.
Yeah, warming up.
It's rather cold where we live,
yes,
and
it is.
It's good to be inside.
When you said our love of rock music, it's kind of funny because we were talking off air before this about the Little River Band and Yacht Rock. I was not going to say that.
Yeah.
Yacht Rock. So I don't know if we've ever reviewed any Yacht Rock, but there might have been a few Yacht Rock tracks on some of the albums we reviewed.
Yeah.
Do you guys like Yacht Rock?
I do. I pop that on every once in a while.
Yeah. It's all right.
Yeah, I like
I
it.
don't know that I could name you a bunch of yacht rock artists, but when it comes along, I'm
Doobie Brothers?
Toto. Little River Band.
Then yeah, sure.
Al Stewart. Remember that song, Time Passages?
Yeah.
Anyway, I digress already.
Well, today's episode's a little bit different from our normal talk as we have some big news to share with all you listeners. So we've been producing this podcast for almost 2 years. And in that time, we've covered 27 albums and a lot of other fun topics we cared about. But it's time to say goodbye. Will it be a permanent goodbye? Time will tell, but it's goodbye for now. So we all have somewhat busier lives now and priorities shift in life, but the love of music is still there. But it's time for a little break. So we thought it'd be a good idea to spend some time on this episode with some reminiscing. Maybe a little bit more than usual.
Reminiscing.
A lot of that, right?
With some yacht rock.
Yeah. Sure.
Little River Band. Yes.
I was thinking Buddy Holly.
Buddy Holly, yeah.
That's
2 years, Dave. Long time, huh?
Yeah, 2 years. 27. Did you think it would have been 27 albums?
No.
I mean, we have more episodes than that, but
Yeah.
So that means 10 or so other special episodes.
What's really interesting, 2 years, we've all aged about 10 in 2 years because we've all
had surgery. We've all
become grandpas in 2 years.
That's true.
that is true.
Yeah. All just this past year.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah. I could tell.
Yeah. It's a great life.
Those crazy kids.
Yeah, the funny thing is we'd review albums and then what was it we were doing again? I better read my notes.
That's halfway through the episode.
Yeah. What album we were doing?
Why are you guys in my bedroom?
Pass me your cheaters, please.
That's just me. You guys wear glasses all the time.
Yeah. Consistent cheaters.
Need another
permanent
Geritol.
Geritol. Yeah. Wow. You are throwing it back.
I am a little older than you guys.
Oh, there it is. One more time.
There's one thing we learned. Lance is a little older.
I told you guys before we started recording, I listened to the Boston album, which was our first episode. And in there, we already established that you were 5 years older. So
really?
We got it going right away. Yes.
Funny.
So contemplating kind of the past 2 years in episodes, what were some highlights that you guys have come across or you think are worth sharing?
It's all a bunch of lowlights. I can't remember. Anything.
I have a lot more highlights in my hair now. I mean,
no kidding.
over the past 2 years.
Well, for me, it was, you mentioned that first episode in Boston. That was a lot of fun for me. And I'm wearing my vintage Boston t-shirt tonight. So that was challenging. Because I don't think any of us really knew what we were doing.
No, not really.
Do we still?
No,
It's
you're
2
right.
years later.
You're right.
But we faked our way through it.
We sure did. Or Dave was a very good editor.
Yeah.
I think Some of you might not know this, but not every episode was fully live all the way through.
What? I mean, I didn't edit hardly anything out of those.
No, that's for the most part.
Just the language, but other than that,
That was just Lance.
I know it's-
Bleep.
clean it up, Lance, please.
Where's the bleep and bleep button, Dave?
I didn't program one of those in. Sorry. So you're on your own.
I have one other, but I'm going to let Brian go first.
Go ahead.
And
Go ahead.
I had a ton of fun with that Deep Purple episodes.
Yeah.
That was, to me, one of the more surprising album reviews because it was, well, I don't want to reiterate everything we said, but it was a super interesting album.
Yeah.
The music
It was so musical.
It was. Yeah.
No, I mean, seriously. I mean, when you were breaking down all the stuff they were doing and all the different instruments and sounds, and I remember the keyboards just like standing out, carrying so much of it. And like, that was a good deep dive on that one.
Yep. I enjoyed that a lot. And then there were others that, you know, you thought maybe were going to be kind of dull and turned out to be good albums.
Yeah.
I learned a lot about these albums.
Or how many times did you think, like, how are we going to talk about this album?
Yeah.
How are we going to come up with enough stuff on this?
Yeah. And
those are always the extra long ones too. They went an hour and a half.
How did we do
guess
that?
What?
You guys found something to talk about though.
Yeah, we did. There's always something.
Yeah.
I think for me, like one of my favorite ones was the Kiss Destroyer.
That was an interesting one.
And the reason is because I was so unfamiliar with that album. I mean, besides a couple songs that everybody knows, knew nothing about it, had never listened to it. And this happened to Dave a lot. And Dave's like, I've never listened to this album. I mean, this is like, but this was one of the few that was like, wow, this is like something totally new for me. So that was kind of fun on that one.
Did you like the album?
I did. I think I gave it a 7.
I can't remember what I gave it either,
which was higher than I thought because it grew on me as I kept listening to it, and it's like, oh yeah, this is kind of interesting.
Because you really hadn't listened to the album much as an entire album, right?
I don't think I had ever listened to it. Maybe once.
Yeah, you mentioned
oh,
that.
really?
It had been like, you know, maybe 10 years ago. I just like threw it on and listened to it, but
that was one of the first albums I had. But Kiss was in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge. And that was when I first started listening to music. So Kiss Alive was my first Kiss album. You know, one with the open it up and you have the guys at some arena with the big Kiss sign.
Yeah.
But then I got Destroyer too. But you know, it'd been a lot of years since I'd listened to it.
Yeah.
We talked about bands maybe you used to listen to. We didn't talk about that yet, but we were talking, maybe we would mention bands you used to listen to, but don't really anymore. Kiss would probably be one of them. So that was kind of fun to move back to something from many years ago.
Yeah.
Was that that wasn't the oldest one we reviewed. I think the Who.
No, we didn't do that.
We didn't do the
Deep
Who.
Purple was probably the oldest
Deep Purple,
one.
I think that was
72,
4?
Yeah.
2, 4, 4. Anyway, old.
Early 70s.
Almost as old as we are.
Almost.
Yeah, that's a good recollection.
Yeah.
Dave?
I don't really have a specific album. I just really enjoyed the process.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, get to hang out with you guys. It's always fun. But also learning so much more about these albums than just the face value or the few songs I knew about them.
Mm-hmm.
The deep dive stuff I just love. I love stories and learning about how a band became a band.
Yeah.
And then just the whole process and, you know, drama of whatever album was, you know, we were reviewing and how they got it recorded and all the problems that came up or solutions they have. And it was just, it's super interesting. And, you know, listening to a lot more music that I wouldn't have normally.
Yeah.
That's always cool.
Yeah, there was some of that for me too as well.
I thought what was fun was how, you know, back in the day, as these bands are at their prime and you're listening to and you're buying their albums when they come out and you're waiting for the next one, you have no idea of all the stuff that's going on behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Until, you know, now or, you know, 20, 30 years later, and you just all of a sudden you're doing research on them and you're like, whoa, I had no idea that stuff was happening. You know,
Yeah.
we're
In
just
the
we're just
news or
waiting for
around.
the album to come out. You know,
Yeah.
And if you might find some magazine somewhere that has a little article of, oh, this is coming up and this is what they're doing, but otherwise you didn't have the information like you do now. So that's kind of fun.
Bands were way more mysterious back then.
And they probably liked it that way.
Larger than life figures. Now, you know, the internet made rock and roll less glamorous, in my opinion, because you knew too much about everybody.
You weren't surprised. I mean, now you're looking up, you're watching live videos of them. You know what the set list is. You know all that.
Yep.
You didn't know any of that stuff before. You just went and like, wow, what's going to happen?
Well, and then it got to the point where everybody's putting out, and I'll cite Metallica because I'm wearing a Metallica shirt tonight right now.
Yeah, bright one. Whew.
And they started putting out mega amounts of content of them during rehearsal, the recording process. And then I told you guys about this, they had a bunch of years where they were putting out their warm-up, before a concert. This is all the video section of their warm-up and backstage and stuff. So
sound check stuff.
Not sound check. No, this is like their warm-up area somewhere in the arena.
Yeah.
They just kind of had curtained off like a little warm-up area with drums and guitars and amps and stuff. But they would record that and then put that out. And it was super interesting to watch if you're a fan,
right?
Because it's all the behind-the-scenes stuff. But how much is too much?
Yeah, you're right. There are some bands that are way overexposed. Dave Grohl. But then there are some bands or artists that even in their absence, I was just talking about, I visited Paisley Park just a couple days ago, and there's still not much video footage of Prince live anywhere.
Wow.
You Google it, and if it goes up, it comes back down.
Just torn down.
They're really controlling that thing.
Yeah.
Huh?
And that is kind of disappointing at times, especially when an artist is gone.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe they just want you to come and tour the Paisley Park studios and, reminisce that way and spend more money. But,
or buy all the DVDs.
But there's just not much of that either. It's just really weird.
That is odd.
One thing too, when you didn't know much about artists, like the mysterious kind of stuff you were talking about, that's kind of cool because a lot of these bands, later on you learn about stuff about them and you're like, I really wish I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So it does ruin a lot of stuff.
Yep.
So, and there's also bands where you're dying to get information or find something out, and then, you do find out and you're like, yeah, I wish they would have just kept that out.
Yep.
So,
ignorance is bliss sometimes.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Was there anything that you discovered about some of these bands you wish you wouldn't have known? I'm putting you on the spot for that one.
I'll just say this, me being a big Van Halen fan.
Yeah.
There's not much. I mean, they were very quiet. Everything, you rarely knew what was going on at all.
Yeah.
I mean, for years, even decades, like nothing. Mm-hmm. And as a fan, you're just like, give me something, you know? So that was one of them. But then later on, you'll find out, well, what was going on during that time. Well, maybe it's good that, we didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
So
they're human too.
I appreciate that now, but at the time, it's like, man, give us something. It's like, do you even care about your fans? Come on.
Well, speaking of bands with silence, Boston, holy cow. I mean, what do they have? Like 5 albums over 40 years?
Right.
Maybe a few more than that. But yeah, I can't think of any, specific example like that, but I do appreciate, go back to the mysterious, the word that we were talking about. I liked thinking these bands, especially when I was younger, were kind of larger than life.
Mm-hmm.
And when you find out that, they're just humans too.
Yep.
And they're all broke like we are now.
Yeah, a good majority of them.
Yeah.
It's just not the same. But the music lives on, and the music is why we did this.
Yep.
And we enjoy it.
Yeah.
One other notable highlight was also recreating these album covers.
Oh man.
Those were fun.
You did. You did some good work on that, Dave.
Kind of started with the police synchronicity one.
Yeah.
And that kind of started the spark, I think, to start doing that.
Yeah.
And so those were kind of a highlight for me.
Yeah,
being
no
the
doubt.
artist guy. That was episode 15 if you want to go back and check that out.
That was the first one that we.
It was
did something
kind of,
special.
I really didn't do the album cover per se, but we did
Yeah.
kind of a homage.
Right.
The black and white photo and the color stripes across us.
Yeah.
But we could have done that. I wish I had that one to do again, but
I wish we could go back and do the Boston album and put all of us up in the spaceship, our little faces
waving?
in the spaceship.
Woo! Yeah. Hold on.
put Brian's head in the shape of the blue flames coming out of the UFO there in the guitar. Yeah.
Well, let me ask this. It was your idea to start this podcast, Dave.
Yeah.
Why did you want to do it?
I think I explained that in one of the episodes. I don't remember when it was.
Let's reminisce on that.
As the three of us would occasionally get together randomly, during different events, lunch, yeah. Not every lunch, but I mean, we'd start to just kind of morph into conversations about music.
Yeah.
And I was more the fly on the wall because you guys are so much more knowledgeable, but it was just so enjoyable just to listen to the depth of knowledge you guys had about these bands and just kind of banter back and forth that I thought.
You say knowledge. It's more like trivia.
Sure.
But thanks for the compliment.
That's knowledge,
It can be.
I just thought it might be fun for other people to kind of hear that kind of, conversation. Be a fly on the wall for some of these conversations. Sure. That was really the impetus because I thought it was fun.
Yeah. So as we exit this, if anybody recognizes our faces, come and talk to us about music. We'll be happy to talk about it.
Yeah, we won't stop talking about music.
Yeah.
No, definitely not.
Even before we started this podcast for a number of years, I had been, I'd often look on the site Ultimate Classic Rock.
Yeah.
And, you get little stories and anniversaries on an album. So that always inspired me to go and listen to the album. And then I listened to the album, and then I'd always pop up Wikipedia or something and just kind of cruise through and kind of get some of the highlights of this album and what was happening and how they recorded and all that. And so now I've been doing that for a long time. So that was kind of fun for me just to get a little background information on stuff. So then to be able to talk about it was kind of cool too.
Mm-hmm. All the learning.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of it felt a little forced and some of it was a little overwhelming.
Oh yeah.
Like the last previous episode we did on U2, there was so much information, and a couple other albums I remember thinking, wow, you could just go down a rabbit hole for days to glean all this information.
And then there's some other bands where it's like, wow, it's hard to even find
nothing.
something on these guys. Wow.
Yep.
How are we going to make this an episode?
Yes. And then those are the ones that are 2 hours.
Yeah. Right.
Another highlight for me was always the Remember When segments.
Yeah.
And that not all winners. I know Lance wasn't always in on whatever I'd bring up, but it was a surprise at least. Yeah. You guys have any Remember When memorable ones?
Yeah, the Play-Doh. I still have it and pull it out once in a while.
In what shape?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Have you tasted it?
Yes.
Salty.
Mine's half gone. I'm trying to savor it for as long as I can.
I got some backups for you. Yeah. I do have a Remember When coming up at the end of this episode as well. So
yeah, those are always fun. I mean, everything is reminiscing, and you think of just music too. You hear a song and it puts you back in a place and a time.
A former girlfriend.
Right. Yeah.
The go-to song.
Right. So that's always fun lots of memories.
throw it back.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's, at least for me, that's one of the differences between music now and music back then. When you're in the middle of it and you're into bands and you're waiting for stuff to come out and bands are huge and all that, those put you in a time and place, and that doesn't really happen anymore. I mean, you're not waiting for something to come out. You're not hearing anything new on the radio. Mm-hmm. So it's not like you're not hanging out with your friends and, cruising in your car and doing all that. You don't do that anymore.
Music is too accessible now in some ways.
Which is good.
It's great.
But it takes away all those experiences that we have, because and I think that just has a lot to do with being young. and you're with your friends. You don't have any other responsibilities. You can do whatever you want, and music is always a part of that.
Yeah.
But yeah, for sure, I remembered record release days.
Yeah.
And you hear one's going to be coming out, and you're like, yeah, I'm going to put that on the calendar. I'm buying that one.
Yep. Catching new stuff on the radio. Here's the new whatever, and wow.
Yeah, that's how you found out.
Right.
If you, and hopefully you'd listen to a album-oriented rock station, get 4 or 5 tracks from the album, so you knew whether or not you might want to buy it. I remember that a specific moment when Styx Cornerstone came out. There's a radio station in the Twin Cities, KQ92. I remember the night they started playing stuff from that album, and I called the station and talked to the DJ, which was like a real cool thing to do back then.
Oh, yeah.
And you told your friends the next day at school.
Yeah, for sure. So those were exciting times, waiting for that. And that they'd have the album maybe a week or two ahead of the release, and then you're waiting, like you say.
Yeah.
Kind of a case in point to something you just brought up, Brian, a minute ago, was that you didn't know you knew when albums were coming out back then. And, we have so many more interests now and, responsibilities, and
there is that.
There's just so much more thrown at you, But when about a year ago, I kind of randomly was happening upon one of the bands I was listening to, and I realized, they have a new album out. Mm-hmm. There's no big, release
announcement coming up.
Unless you're really following them close on probably social media now. But even from one of my favorite bands, the Pixies, it's all of a sudden here. There wasn't a huge countdown and things like that too.
Yep.
So.
Yep, it is different. But at the same time, so easy to discover stuff that you weren't able to at the time, which is fun.
Yeah, maybe towards the end, I know Lance had brought up maybe a small talk about some bands that we maybe listened to back then and some bands we listen to now.
Mm-hmm.
What the difference? So you, in a previous episode, you said you were learning a lot about my tastes and about how I listen to things.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just talk about that and riff on that for a minute too, because what did you guys learn by doing this podcast about taste and things? Because I learned a lot about your guys' different tastes and how diverse, especially you, Brian. I thought I didn't have a clue how really diverse your tastes were in music. I knew you listened to a lot, but all of a sudden I knew we were talking about a certain album, and you would say, I own these other 3 albums by the same band, and I would not have guessed that.
I thought all you listened to was Van Halen.
Right? Yeah. And same with Lance. I mean, he's really, I didn't realize how much you like the 70s.
I was going to say the 70s, for Lance
the
is
jam.
like, because that was, he was a little older.
Yes.
So, stuff that we were familiar with, the hits and stuff, you were buying the albums and you were into that stuff.
Yeah.
And so, you were, way knowledgeable about that. And then as we moved, into the mid to later 80s, now you weren't as into those bands anymore, and you weren't as familiar with some of the stuff that, maybe Dave and I were listening to, because that was kind of our sweet spot.
Yep, for sure.
And I always thought that was very interesting because it's only 5 years.
I know.
And how big
what a
difference there is.
I had heard once that once you get into your early 20s, that's kind of when your listening changes or stops in a way.
Oh.
I mean, now you're kind of stuck with this stuff before, and you'll listen to other stuff, but not the way you listen to those first, probably a good 10 years of your life. And that's kind of where your sweet spot is.
Yeah, because there's so many memories.
Right.
The big impression is made there then.
Yeah.
Yep.
Here's what you're saying.
Right.
But I would say, I don't know about you guys, but I think, there was a period when I went away to college till about, I don't know, maybe that's a really interesting thing to consider. When did I start getting back into music? Because I like a lot of new stuff as well.
Yeah, same.
And I don't.
And that's something we learned too, right?
Yeah.
I think it really started when streaming became mainstream, and no pun intended, and you could you get all these cool suggestions from whatever service you use, and you think, well, I'll click on that and listen to it. And then I remember for a while, I can't remember what service it was, maybe Google Play. I was on Google Play for a while. Anyway, I was buying not physical, just downloadable albums, because you could buy stuff for like $2-3. Mm-hmm. Some was older, some was new, and I'm like, I'll take a chance on that. So I started getting into music probably about the time that streaming really took off again. And now I'm way back into it because I don't have any kids at home anymore and got the stereo in the basement. And
so you all kind of come full circle now.
I totally have.
Because you're back to albums.
Yep.
Vinyl, you have your stereo set up. Maybe a little bit more high end than when you were a teenager.
It is.
That is something I learned about Lance.
Yeah?
Holy cow.
What's
you
that?
know your stereo stuff.
Yes.
I love that.
I know.
He still talks about
you
cables.
talk about all sorts of stuff, and I'm just like, I have no idea what you're talking about. and then it's like, oh man, and you get so much better than this. And I'm like, really? Okay.
A day doesn't go by where I sit and look at stereo gear online. I want that.
If you could subscribe to that magazine back in the 80s, you were probably getting them, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Audio,
whatever those were. They
Audio Equipment Magazine. I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah. Team Electronics. I don't know.
Totally Electronics.
Totally.
That happened though when I worked at a place called Audio King. I think I've talked about
that.
that.
That was you were in a place where you could really know that stuff. And learn that stuff and see all the differences. We're just going into the place with the wall of car stereos, and we're going like, oh, that one looks kind of cool.
Yeah.
That one sounds awesome.
Is it loud?
Yeah,
all right.
exactly. Yeah.
We'll take it.
And that's the way my first 2-3 stereo systems were. I'd go to Team Electronics, or Shock Electronics was one in the Twin Cities, and whatever you could get for a turntable, receiver, and speakers. If you get a package for like $300, and the speakers look pretty big. Got big woofers.
Oh man, yeah.
Big equals better,
The
right?
bigger the better.
Yeah. But it's a fun hobby. Like I tell my wife, I don't have any motorcycles, snowmobiles, boats, any of that stuff. So I'm going to spend it on stereo gear.
But don't let the basement flood.
Yeah, right. No kidding.
All the stuff's off the floor, right? Right.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to have to move pretty soon, get it out of the basement. But then I'm going to have to build a soundproof room, with sound stuff on the walls, like in this studio.
Right.
Sound absorption.
Yeah.
I learned that Dave doesn't only like Metallica, too. So I thought the only band he ever listened to was Metallica.
Oh, come on.
We never got to Dave's 90s stuff, and that's really where you would have been shining.
Yeah.
Totally. I think I got more into music. Yeah, you were mentioning that when you got into college, and I was just trying to think. I thought I was pretty big into music in high school, but nowhere near until I got into college, and then it just really took off, especially in the 90s. That I was, when grunge broke, I was into a lot of those bands, but then also, still keeping up with some of the 80s band stuff. Mm-hmm. But I was way into the 90s stuff.
Losers like me were listening to when you were listening to that.
What?
Country was huge in the early 90s.
Yeah.
Garth Brooks and, Randy Travis and all that. And that's what I was listening to.
Well, I watched, Garth Brooks had some live special that one of our friends, Mike Rezitek, shout out Mike, he brought over to our apartment and made us watch.
Yeah.
He's like, wasn't that cool? And I'm like, yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
it was cool because it was like a rock concert.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah.
oh, what an idea. He's just doing now what everyone else has been doing for the past 10 years in other genres.
Right.
But he brought that to country music.
Yeah.
He did. And I would say, as far as entertaining shows I've been to, his shows were super entertaining. I mean, everybody knew every word to every song, and that's kind of fun when you're at. It reminded me of Journey back in the day when Faithfully and Open Arms, the whole arena is singing. Yeah. Those are some of the most fun concerts to be at when the audience participation is at.
Yeah.
Except when the artist lets you the the audience sing too long.
The entire,
Yeah.
They're like, wait a
annoying.
minute.
Yeah.
Wait, I didn't come here to listen to everybody else. I
Yeah.
want to hear you sing it. Start it over.
Yeah.
I think there was a live Tom Petty album, Pack Up the Plantation.
Yeah.
And there was a song in there where in the beginning,
Yeah. I know what
the
you're talking
audience
about.
is singing and they carried on, but then he stops and then he goes back and then he starts it over and he sings it.
Oh, nice.
So that's like
Okay.
best of both worlds.
Yes.
You know what band would never get away with that? Rush. Can you imagine crowd trying to sing Geddy Lee's parts?
yeah.
Oh man.
That would sound horrible. I can't sing that high.
And the other thing I learned from Dave was, well, whenever you start talking about guitar and guitar parts and breaking things down a little bit and this is doing that, you had that knowledge. You had the guitar knowledge. What's happening? Like, what is this? Well, he's doing kind of this and this is happening.
I could fake it anyway.
Well, you did.
All I know is air guitar.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Lance is always like, what is that? Some sort of sense? No, it's this. Dave will always set us straight on what it really is.
That's a thing. Always a thing.
Dave knows his pedals.
Yes, he does.
A few. It got a lot more complicated after I started playing guitar. Well, even before then, but
I suppose pedals, I mean, they're still a thing, but
Nah,
not nearly as much as they used to.
it's
Yeah.
a mix of stuff.
Because amps can make so many different
You have processors
sounds
and
now,
things too
yeah.
that you can just
Well, you have
flip between
probably all this
sounds.
all in, like a big pedal has a bunch of stuff in it.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can basically toggle between a bunch of different stuff.
You know what else I learned from Lance?
Yeah.
Whoopie John.
Speaking of
I
things
did not know about Whoopie John.
Speaking of things you didn't want to know about.
I will never forget it, Lance.
Can our exit music on this episode be some Whoopie John? Beer barrel polka.
I could maybe make that happen.
Oh,
Who
yeah.
knows? So what do you guys do to stay current with music today in today's world? So I listen to a lot of suggested music like we talked about,
Yep.
Discover. You had mentioned too earlier about Google Play or whatever. I remember before Spotify even came out, back when iTunes was the thing, they used to have like a free download of the week.
Yeah.
And it was just some
right,
random song.
yes.
I have a bunch of those that I
Yep.
started, going off of and finding more music from them. But there's a bunch of them that I just know as like kind of my one-hit wonder
Yeah,
band
right.
stuff. that I
Because you
still
got it
listen
free.
to. Exactly, yeah.
I mean, I love streaming and that's what keeps me current, but I do kind of miss iTunes in a way
yeah.
because you had to purchase.
Yeah.
It's just like, kind of like buying an album or buying a tape.
the Pepsi bottle caps where you get a free
Yes.
download.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Those were awesome.
You'd see a bottle laying down on the ground. You're like, ooh, I'm going to grab that and see. Maybe there might be a free.
Right. But streaming really is as much as we like records when records ruled, it really changed how I was able to access music. And I think it made my catalog much broader because there's some albums or groups you would say, yeah, I kind of like that, but I'm not going to spend $10 or I'm not
Right.
going to now spend $25
Yeah.
to buy that.
Or a band is past their peak and they're going down and it's like, whoa, I didn't realize they had another 3 albums
Yeah.
after this big one. Well,
Yeah.
now you can go back and listen to it.
Yep.
So that's where my rediscovery is in the old bands of that time period that I had never listened to.
Yeah, there's a lot of 70s stuff that I didn't buy because I didn't have any money to buy tons of albums that I go back. And that's what surprises me. Some of the 70s stuff, bands that I didn't listen to, I really like now. Like, get this. I kind of like the Beatles. I didn't like the Beatles at all growing up.
Really?
Oh, I couldn't stand them. Rolling Stones, too. Nope, that's old. That was before my time. And
Isn't it funny? We thought they were old back then.
Yeah. And
Look
they were
how
like
old they are
10,
now.
10 years out. Yeah.
I still remember sometime in the 90s when it was the Voodoo Lounge.
Yeah.
When that came out, I bought that one.
Like
that was like
93 or
that may be
something.
the only Rolling Stones album I own.
Yeah.
Well, I really wanted that. I loved the few songs off there and bought it and loved it.
Yeah.
but that's probably the only one. And like when I was growing up too, no Rolling Stones. I know you kind of hear the classics on the radio.
Yeah.
And same thing with the Beatles. You know a few Beatles tunes growing up, but it wasn't like I was going out and buying Beatles albums.
Yeah. I think maybe when Beatles remastered all of those, and I bought a bunch of them on vinyl, and they weren't super expensive compared to what some other albums are. I think you get them for $20 to $25, and they sound super good. These remastered or remixed. Some of them are remixed, I think. So that's what surprised me. In bands like, I never really got into the Allman Brothers in the 70s, but gosh, I like them now. I mean, Steely Dan too. I liked Steely Dan, but I love Steely Dan now. It's probably just part of growing up. I mean, it's not AC/DC, it's not Boston, it's not Foreigner.
Right.
It's more grown up rock.
Yeah.
Dad rock.
Yeah, right.
Dad rock. Yep. Or dad rock, yacht rock.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the things I've noticed the most about going back and listening is finding those albums that were recorded so well, that sound so good, as opposed to some that were just, you could tell, let's get in the studio, we got limited time, they're not mixed very well. And that includes some of my more favorite bands. I mean, we've talked about Van Halen. They'd benefit by remixing some of those albums. Styx is another one. Boston, remix them so I can hear some of the instruments, because right now you go back and listen to some of those old albums and it's noisy. I'd love to be able to just say, there's the guitar, there's the bass, but you can't do that all the time with some of the older albums.
Yeah.
Steely Dan, you sure can, though. Anyway, I'm digressing again.
So what do you like about music back then in the 70s and 80s versus music today? We've touched on it a few episodes.
Yeah, I think it was a lot harder to do everything back then. So the whole recording process, I mean, tape and splicing and all that kind of stuff, and effects, you want a sound effect. Well, you need to make the sound effect.
Yeah.
Now you just look up something and I don't know, Pro Tools, everything's just so easy to do whatever you want to do.
Yeah.
You are 100% correct.
You don't need to bring in an orchestra. You can create your own little orchestra here, So I think that's the biggest difference. So you've lost that intimacy of everything that you really had to concentrate on doing, instead of going like, we'll fix that later. We'll add that later. Don't worry about that.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the lost thing. And another thing is too, we talked about this too, that there's just not many bands around anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, like
not as
a
many,
band.
Yeah.
It's just kind of artists
with like 4 or 5 distinct personalities that, you knew who the bass player was, you knew who the guitar player was. Now it's, just Harry Styles and some studio musicians.
Right.
Nothing against Harry Styles. I actually kind of like him.
Or studio musicians.
Yeah. Muscle Shoals.
Yeah,
that was something we learned, Muscle Shoals.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, it was really bands, people, musicians playing and doing their thing without all the stuff that you can easily correct now.
Plus, and I wonder how many bands, the bands that are still around today, are able to write songs and perform them enough to just go into the studio and record them, like the old, the story about Van Halen, their first album, when they were just so polished after playing those songs for years that they just went in and just cranked them out. And how many, we've heard that from other band stories too, that they just went in and cranked them out. But how often does that happen, you think, now?
Probably not so much, because bands probably aren't touring. I mean, they're not hitting the clubs like they used to, become a band.
Yeah.
It's more being discovered and then being thrown into it. So
yeah, and I'm not sure how I feel about shows like America's Got Talent and
it's kind of the cheap way of getting there.
Yeah.
It seems like it, but it's working for some artists, and I don't know if I like that. But then again, you hear the stories about unscrupulous record labels and managers and things, and robbing bands blind back then. Yeah. Maybe that's improved. I don't know. One of the things that I think I appreciated about music back then was you didn't have to have the look or the right outfit. I mean, if you were a good singer-songwriter and somebody believed in you, you could have a career. And that's why there's a ton of 70s, maybe 70s was the sweet spot for that, but singer-songwriters who maybe had 2-3 hits, but ended up doing 2-3, and maybe others were more successful. You think of like a James Taylor or something, Elton John. You just don't really have artists like that anymore. And now it's about, I feel bad for female artists because the look is kind of the thing now. And
well,
it's just
for us, MTV, that completely changed the whole landscape.
Yeah.
And that, you hear artists talk about that were, big or, recording in the 70s, and then they hit the 80s, and it's just like, oh no.
Yeah.
Now I got to do a video. Now I got to be concerned about how I look and how I present myself and all that stuff. So yeah, that changed.
Yep. And some of those artists did embrace it and
and
it worked. I mean, Def Leppard would be one that, boy, they really bought into the video scene.
Yeah.
But that's kind of what made them big. They were trying, they were moving along, but that skyrocketed them. And a lot of those bands that you probably would have never heard about if there wasn't MTV.
Yeah, true. Yep.
A mixed blessing for some of them.
Yep. So the old ones hated it. The young ones like, this is
the wave of the future, man.
That's right.
Yeah. I liked discovering new bands back then too, and how just new everything was. There's some new bands too that'll pop up every once in a while. Even today, obviously there's just new music being created all the time, but it just felt like such a big discovery to talk about with your friends when you discovered a band and that you mutually liked this band or listened to them and got them into it as well.
Yeah.
That was always really cool, I thought.
And being in on the ground level was always kind of cool too. Like before they got big, you're like, oh yeah.
Especially if you got to see them before they played an arena or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't get to do that very much in Alaska. No, so.
They had concerts in Alaska?
Yeah, he'd mentioned a few.
I know.
Concerts episode, go back and listen.
Yeah, there's some iconic ones. How about bands? I know you're the moderator, Dave, but bands that maybe you are into now. I sort of alluded to this, but you're into now, but you weren't back in the day. I have a few.
Into now that I wasn't back in the day.
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you were going to ask the opposite of that, actually.
I kind of alluded to it
already. You could do both.
Yeah.
Yeah, vice versa. Yeah.
Into now.
I mean, I said the Beatles.
Well, I could say now, but this is probably the past 20 years. Yeah. But like at the time I wasn't into it, but Chris Isaak. I really got into Chris Isaak mid to later 90s and kind of discovered him after he was, maybe 3 albums in or something. And, but I
still love his album San Francisco Days.
Oh,
that's
so good.
Great album.
Yeah.
This one will blow your mind. I didn't really like Pink Floyd growing up. Boy, do I like Pink Floyd now.
Yeah.
And we've seen both the Brit Floyd and Australian Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
I've only seen the one.
Oh, okay.
The last one we went to.
Brian and I have seen both.
Yeah.
That one is, I'm not sure why back then. Probably because it wasn't AC/DC.
Yeah. Right.
Didn't have screaming guitars and
you had
pounding
more
drums.
Tunnel vision back then.
For sure.
For a lot of stuff.
For sure.
I actually started getting into them in high school. Because I had a friend who kind of turned me on to a couple of their songs.
He probably liked to smoke pot, didn't he?
No. I'll mention the name to you later. You recognize the name.
That's what I think of in the 70s and Pink Floyd sitting in a room.
I can neither verify, I can neither confirm nor deny it. Yes. I actually don't know. He's a pastor now though. So
okay, all right.
We'll just leave it. Yeah. We all did stupid things.
But then going on kind of a tear of like how many Pink Floyd albums can I collect?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then really getting into all of them and listening to a lot of them and watching The Wall, and
yeah, you exposed me to a lot of Pink Floyd.
I did. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I had Dark Side of the Moon. maybe The Wall, but the other stuff I did not have.
A little more obscure things.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like by clouds and stuff.
Yeah, obscured by clouds.
Yeah. I had The Wall growing up, but didn't have anything else. And the only reason I had The Wall is because we love that song. We don't need no education.
Yeah.
You know, that's cool, man.
Teacher, leave those kids alone.
Yeah. But it's really in the last 10, 12 years I've really gotten into Pink Floyd, which is weird.
Yeah.
I know.
But it's so easy now.
Yeah,
Find
for sure.
whatever you want, listen to everything.
Yep. I love it.
We've brought this up before, and I actually had an encounter, we'll say, with some Led Zeppelin recently, and I listened to a little bit of it. It just still is not doing anything for me, but I was really into Zeppelin in
me too.
late high school years too. I think I have just about every album, and I was on a kind of the same collection of Pink Floyd and Zeppelin, getting into those two bands at the same time, and really, really loving Led Zeppelin and just about every song they did. I knew pretty well.
What was did they have a live album, How the West Was Won?
Yeah,
or
I
something?
have that.
Yeah.
I remember, I mean, when did that come out? Early 2000s?
Something like that.
Yeah.
I remember the three of us talking about that.
Oh, really?
And even maybe like all three of us going in together and buying it, kind of a thing. And I don't remember, was there like an unreleased song or something that was on it that was kind of special?
I do not remember.
Yeah, that's a good question. I just know that.
I know at that point, I was still listening to Led Zeppelin and it was okay. But then shortly after that, I remember thinking like, why was I ever going to buy that? I have no interest in them anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I liked Zeppelin, but you know, it was just more like rock and roll and Stairway to Heaven. But I think I like them kind of like I like Pink Floyd, but I don't listen to them nearly as much as Pink Floyd. But that's those bands that maybe got their start in the 60s and were big early 70s. Not so much, but boy, I kind of like them now. I don't know if I have a favorite Zeppelin album though. They're all so kind of different from one another. I like In Through the Outdoor a lot, actually.
That's maybe my favorite
Is
one,
it? Yeah.
actually. And that's because I probably have, you're connecting it with memories, right?
Yeah.
That's what I was
music.
working at a certain place with some good friends, and we used to listen to that just a ton. Probably overplayed it, but I still love it, and I connect that with just so many good memories.
Mine was probably 2, Led Zeppelin 2.
It's a great
But
album.
I think 4 was probably the first one I had.
Yeah.
Just because you had Black Dog, you
yeah.
had
Stairway.
Rock and Roll, Stairway to Heaven, so that.
Yeah.
But 2 was probably my favorite.
Do you have it on cassette or album?
No, I had the record at that time.
I had the cassette of 4. Remember that?
Yeah, I think all my Led Zeppelin stuff was records. And
Still have them?
I don't believe I do.
Yeah.
I do have a box set of their singles that were released. I think there's maybe 10 singles in a box. That was kind of cool.
Oh, I think I might remember that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool at the time because the one had Hey, Hey, What Can I Do on it, which was only released on a single. And, that was the only way you could get it at the time. So I remember being like, yes, I got it. I recorded them all, Had my own greatest hits before we had a Led Zeppelin greatest hits.
Back when you could do that.
Yep.
So what are some bands you're listening to now? What's in your most recent playlist, your top 3 or 4 bands?
Check the phone.
Everybody's going to Spotify now.
What
I had to write
we
mine down just because I know Brian doesn't listen to a lot of modern music, but you got to listen to a lot of diverse stuff because you can't just listen to Van Halen every day.
Okay. So
Go to your Spotify top 24.
So I listened to the Scorpions today.
Yeah.
I listened to Joe Walsh, Ozzy Osmosis.
What? Oh, okay.
Osmosis, the album.
Yeah.
I listened to Phil Collins' Hello, I Must Be Going. Triumph.
Oh, wow. Triumph.
And Living Color. I listened to Time's Up the other day.
Really?
A little more
Good for you.
obscure album.
Yeah. I only had the one album.
Yeah. I remember buying Time's Up. I think I might have the CD still, but I did at the time. I remember buying it at a pawn shop when I lived in Washington. And I remember going into this pawn shop a number of times going like, should I pull the trigger on it? It was probably like $5, at the time. CDs were like half price of a used one would be half price of a new, but That's what I've been listening to.
How about you, Lance? You still pulling it up?
I have 2 music services I use, and I'm starting to use something called Qobuz a lot more. This is my nerdy.
Yeah.
You know, it's they have the most high res versions because I stream a lot of stuff through my digital.
We wouldn't notice it. You would.
Exactly.
You would. I guarantee you.
You keep saying that.
Come
you
on
keep
over.
saying, hey, I'll invite you guys over. We should go listen to an album.
You're welcome anytime.
Hasn't happened.
You're welcome anytime. But as far as new music, I'm looking at my recent plays here. A band called Bleachers. I really dig them.
No, not heard of them.
Do you remember the band Fun from
Yeah.
They had 2 albums?
Fun Dot.
Yep. He was the guitar player, and he's also, his name escapes me right now.
It's okay.
But he produces Taylor Swift.
Oh, okay.
Really good stuff.
Successful guy.
Yes. Jack Antonoff is his name. Arcade Fire I've been listening to lately. Speaking of Led Zeppelin. Robert Plant and Alison Krauss I've been listening to lately.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Yep.
But then get this. ABBA Gold is in here.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
There's a couple of Cheap Trick albums. There's a lot of Pink Floyd. There's some Bob Seger and Steely Dan. Yeah, I go back to the staples a lot, but I do like finding new stuff. There's a band called Vampire Weekend. I don't know if you've heard of them.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
Yeah.
I really like them too. I bought tickets to a show for an artist named Lauren Mayberry. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but
No.
have you heard of the band?
Nope.
No.
Preemptively. Nope.
Actually, no, I can't even. I'm a little bit older than you guys.
Yeah. And so it's taking you longer to get through this list.
Hang a minute.
I didn't ask for your top 20.
All right. While you're looking for that, I got a quick story.
Okay.
So, you know the song, the Lionel Richie song, All Night Long?
Yes.
Yeah.
All night long.
All night.
Who sings that part? I just learned this recently.
I thought I just did too. Michael Jackson.
No.
No, who is it?
Richard Marx.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that funny?
Because I
He
saw
was-
like some little video podcast he was
I
on
did
or
too,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah,
That's
I'm the guy that
crazy.
sings all night. So funny.
I saw him in concert actually.
Oh, that's right.
He
Yeah,
opened
you
up
did.
for Night Ranger.
Night Ranger, yeah.
Richard Marx.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
Yeah. I mean, you
Interesting.
knew his hits on the radio. That was good.
So I bought tickets to an artist called Lauren Mayberry, and she sang in the band Churches. I don't know if
Yeah.
you've heard of Churches.
I've heard of
With
The
a V.
Church.
The Church would be an 80s band.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, she's in Churches. It's kind of techno pop sort of stuff. I dig that too. It's just fun finding stuff that you enjoy. That's why we do this. That's why we did this podcast.
Yeah.
It's because we love music. I listen to classical too, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll come into your office occasionally and he's like blasting some Bach or something,
And he's asleep on the table,
Yeah.
on the desk.
pretty much. I have to wake him up.
I'm proofreading.
Well,
I can't do it with You Shook Me All Night Long.
got to concentrate with that stuff. I was just looking at a few artists I wrote down. I had to look at, what have I been listening to, because it's depending on the day, probably like you guys too. It varies. I got into a band called Fu Manchu. I think I mentioned
I've heard of
that
them.
maybe one.
Yep.
So but these all kind of have a same vibe to them for the most part, I'd say. Black Rebel Motorcycle Club.
Yep. We
And
saw them.
We saw them open up for the Cult.
Mm-hmm.
How many years ago was that? Was that 2 years?
Two.
Ago? 2 years ago. Local H is another band I kind of got into. A number of years ago, I was talking with Benji and talking about the band out of England. And I'm blanking on the
Rolling Stones.
Royal Blood.
Beatles.
No, Royal Blood. It's like a duo, and the guitarist has an effect where he can switch on and off a couple strings so it sounds like bass, and he's a really good guitar player and singer, so it's a lot of coordination there. But anyway, another duo at the time was Local H, and so Benji pointed me to them, so I really got into them. That's the one that had the newer album that all of a sudden I saw come out, about a year ago. And then Jack White too.
Yeah.
He's such a diverse artist. I just really got into him in the last few years. And
He's awesome.
yep, going to see him
April.
April. Yeah. That's what's on the playlist right now. And then I'll, jump back around some 80s and 90s stuff occasionally too.
Ozzy Osbourne, Black Sabbath.
No.
No, you don't like Ozzy?
I mean, like, No More Tears stuff. Zakk Wylde. I like Zakk Wylde a lot. His sound on that's awesome.
You know, I think the best version of Black Sabbath is the early 80s, Heaven and Hell, Mob Rules,
with
Ronnie James Dio.
Oh,
Gosh, I love that stuff.
Yeah, that's pretty good stuff. So who was an artist that you wish we had covered that we didn't?
Oh,
Or reviewed?
wow. Good question.
I wanted to do Pixies because they were at the end of the 80s and I knew it covered just because it's one of my more favorite bands. And they're so different. Doolittle, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you shared that with me. That's the only Pixies album I know. It's the only one I've ever listened to.
It's just weird
but
stuff.
I like it.
Yeah.
That's good.
That would have been a fun one.
Yeah.
I don't think we did Steely Dan, did we?
We did not.
No.
Yeah, I would have loved to do a
They
Steely
suck.
Dan album.
They suck.
Yeah. I mean, any of their 70s, early 80s albums would have been kind of cool.
Yeah.
Asia.
Yeah, we talked about maybe doing that one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So you, Brian?
I wanted to do a Sammy Hagar album, and I wanted to do a Genesis album.
Genesis would have been cool, yeah. 80s or 70s? Genesis.
Probably 80s.
Yeah.
Early 80s.
Duke
would have been interesting.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever listened to an entire Genesis album.
Yeah.
Have you ever listened to an entire Yes album?
Yeah.
You have? Oh, good.
90125?
Yeah.
Is that what it is? Yeah.
Brian that doesn't count.
What do you mean it doesn't
That's
count?
a different band than the one I'm thinking of.
He answered your question.
I answered your question.
You did, yes.
If you don't want to be specific with your questions, then,
That's like saying, have you listened to a Van Halen album? Well, if it was after David Lee Roth left, there wasn't really a Van Halen. It was Van Hagar. I mean, you mentioned Sammy Hagar. I think Sammy Hagar had a pretty big influence on what that band played.
Oh, yeah.
Because their sound changed. And it was more accessible, more top 40-ish.
Oh, totally.
But I think that has more to do with Eddie. Because Eddie's
Was
writing
he changing
the music.
too? Yeah.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
He was changing, in the early 80s.
Well, true.
And doing stuff that the band was like, no, we're not doing that. So he was the one that was really pushing. And that's what, pushed him into building his own studio so he could get control to do the stuff that he wanted to do. Mm-hmm. So as much as people blame Sammy for things changing too much, it was Eddie. Sammy's writing the music or the songs to what Eddie's giving him, to what Eddie is writing.
So Sammy just did the lyrics? Mm-hmm. He didn't write any music for the band? Wow, I did not realize that.
Nope, that's all Eddie.
Well, good job, Eddie.
So when you complain like, oh, why are there all these ballads or whatever, that's Eddie. That's what he's writing.
Well, that's the mark of a true artist, though, a creative. You're not going to stick in the same, lane your entire career.
Yeah, they're doing the same old thing while I listen to it, right?
Exactly.
That's exactly what he said.
Yeah, yeah.
He's like, why? Well, just go buy the previous album if you're going to repeat the album again and do the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah. Any other questions for the group you guys have?
Nope, I don't have anything
just
else.
all the memories that popped up that you just forgot about. That how often you're talking about a song or we just get in a conversation. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that or this or that.
Yeah,
that was fun.
Or remember standing in line for concert tickets.
Oh man,
yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, I have a neighbor who recently posted about that because she shared some concert tickets that she, I don't know, just maybe recently came across. But she had, I can't remember what the concert was, but the row was 0. And her girlfriend had stayed out 8 hours in line the night before or whatever to get in there, back when you could actually get good seats by doing that.
Yeah.
And you can't do that now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Luck of the draw or,
Yeah, or, the first 50 rows are artist preferred, fan club, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But I will tell you this. I know people complain about Ticketmaster or whatever fees, and I know they're high, but man, I don't know if I'd want to sit out in the cold sidewalk
well,
for
not now,
hours.
but maybe when you were, 16, you'd be
for sure.
Yeah.
So
for your
I
favorite
guess what
band,
I'm saying,
you do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, I think some of the fees are worth it to me. Maybe not $30 worth of fees, but $10, $12, something like that for not having to. And you can, go and look at the map and pick the seats you want to be in. That's kind of cool. Yeah. But it was also kind of cool when you got those tickets printed and you're like, oh, row 3, you are kidding me. That was exciting too.
Or even more exciting when there was no rows.
Yep, general admission.
General admission.
That's what I was used to.
Yeah.
I didn't go to too many general admission shows. Maybe there was a law against it in Minnesota.
Huh. Yeah, there might have been. Because I remember, seeing videos and I'm like, what are those seats doing out in the middle of the floor?
Yeah.
Yes.
So those are kind of nice because, well, you have to get there, a little early. I mean, I was never like trying to get to the front or anything, but you could pick your seat. Hey, let's go over to this side. Let's go here. Let's, whatever. Let's go down on the floor for a while. And when you're done there, let's go back up and sit down or whatever.
Yeah.
That was being able to wander and kind of go where you wanted to go. Like, oh, I want to sit on Eddie's side, Yeah. That's kind of nice.
It's so foreign to me.
Yeah.
Never been to any shows like that.
Yeah. I don't think it was till I came out to Minnesota where it's just like, oh, wow, we actually have to pick a seat or get a seat.
Yeah.
This is what's available.
And the good part of that is, no mob swirling around you. And
that's true.
Yeah. No mosh pits.
Right. Yeah.
But you have to worry about somebody throwing a chair at you.
True. Or stage diving.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, guys, it's time for one last Remember When. This is the segment where I ask Barney and Lance their thoughts about something we grew up with but may no longer be around. Today's item is no longer around today. Record clubs. Columbia House / BMG. I thought this is maybe a fitting way to end in the last show here.
Yeah.
Can't believe we didn't talk about this already.
We've touched on it.
Did we? Okay.
Throughout a couple episodes maybe, but stamps.
Stamps, yes.
All the stamps that you'd have to find and put on your order.
Yeah. I actually have some stamps left somewhere.
Really?
In a box of, some of those. I got into that. I don't think I was buying cassettes or records through that. I think it was when CDs came out. That was when I started.
Same. Yep.
I remember like the cassettes, you could tell that they were BMG or Columbia House.
Really?
Yep. They didn't fold out. They're just a little cheap liner.
Yeah, they were different. And they had like, I remember the cassettes had like a red square or rectangle around the title. And so they were different.
Yep.
Yeah.
And you could look at it and you could like, that's kind of a fake.
Even some of the records, although they sound okay, they don't
the quality wasn't quite there.
Yep, in the used value market, they're not
right
the same as an original pressing.
Yep.
But the CDs, even though they said manufactured by BMG or CRC, I think was the Columbia House one. It just had this little CRC in the corner. They sounded fine.
They sounded fine, and they looked like you bought it in the store, unless you looked for that little label down the corner.
It was an exciting day when you go to the mailbox and you got 14 CDs waiting for you.
Yeah.
I did cassettes. I think it's BMG at the time because it was later on, and that's where I ordered my first Metallica cassette, A Master of Puppets. I had a friend of mine in high school kind of got me into them. And at first I was a little apprehensive, but I thought, okay, well, if it's the free one.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Little did you know.
Oh, man.
I don't remember anything else. Don't remember specifically what else I would have ordered.
Yeah.
But I do remember that one.
I remember, I bet you 75% of my CD collection was from BMG.
I would say me too.
Because, I mean, when you broke it down where you buy one and you end up getting 10 free and then you have to buy whatever it was.
Yeah.
I think it broke down to like $3 or $3 or $4 a CD, which was really a third of the price.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
So it was a good deal. And I remember too, like if you waited long enough, like you had a year to make a purchase or whatever it was.
Yeah, yeah.
And if you waited long enough, they would give you incentives like, oh, do your purchase and we'll give you 2 more free or 3 more free. And so I used to always wait for that. And I would also have a couple different ones going. So I'd like use a different address or a different name. Everything, so I could have a couple going. And,
no wonder they went out of business, Brian.
Yeah. So that was the way to do it.
I think it was streaming that put them out of business, Dave.
Oh, okay. All right.
I remember getting the little stamps.
But thanks, Brian.
Yeah. Hey, I did what I can. You guys are happy now, aren't you?
You happy with the result?
You wish you were still buying CDs, Lance? Is that what you're saying?
Speaking of $3 a piece, you can go down to the local record store and get 10 for $10.
Yeah.
And there's some of the selections are pretty decent.
Yeah.
Oh.
But it's easier to sit and, play music on your phone with the remote.
I remember getting the ads, whatever, from TV Guide. That was when.
Oh yeah.
That was where I was getting them from.
Didn't they come in kind of a little
TV
shopper
Guide.
sometimes too, or something?
Probably,
in the mail?
yeah.
Oh, I do remember getting the big envelope in the mail too.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
They would just mail directly.
Yeah.
Because it was a direct mail.
Once you
thing.
get on a list too,
Yeah.
that stuff would start.
Then I
coming.
started getting both Columbia House and BMG, their competitor, for a while. Right?
But they get
Yeah.
But the way they got you was they'd send you that free one or that one every month or whatever, and if you don't send it back, and then all of a sudden you get charged, you had to send it back right away without opening it, and all that. So they got you.
How did you respond? I can't remember how that worked. Did you get a letter? Yeah, you got something in the mail that said this is the selection of the month. They didn't automatically send it to you. You'd have to send a response card back first, right?
I don't think so. I think it automatically came, and then if you didn't want it, you send it back. They would just send it to you.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
It was a few years ago. It's okay.
But these kind of clubs have been around. I remember watching a Leave It to Beaver episode, and Beaver got stuck in one of these buying
oh, really?
45s.
No kidding.
Yep. And of course they just kept sending him, and he's all excited. Well, of course, after a few months, he's
got a bill for $100.
Yeah, and it's like, what? I thought these were all free. They kept sending them to me.
Oh, funny.
So those clubs were around, back in the 60s.
I'm Googling that one tonight. I want to watch that
Yeah,
episode.
yeah, it's pretty good.
All right, guys, that will do it for today's episodes. Any last words of wisdom for our listeners?
Wisdom? I don't know about wisdom, but
Any last words for our listeners?
I just appreciate everybody who listened. The funnest part for me was when people would comment on things, or you talked about this, that was great, and people learning or telling us that they learned something they didn't know. That was always kind of fun. And then people always come up to you with one of their stories from that album, or something they knew about that time.
Or we inspired them to buy the album.
We inspired them to buy the album. So those are the fun things. So thanks to all those people. I know my family was a big support.
Yeah.
They would often come to me and talk to me about stuff. Oh, you remember you said this? I don't remember that, but yeah, great. So appreciate everyone who listened and commented. That was fun.
Yeah, I made a few new friends because of this. Mm-hmm. Or people that I knew, but knew a lot better now.
Yeah.
Because
music brings people together.
It totally does.
Yeah.
Music is the one great equalizer in the world. Because you go to a concert and doesn't matter what your political persuasion is, or if you're a Lutheran or a Catholic or a Baptist, everybody goes to see that artist. I suppose unless it's like a religious rock music band or something. But it does bring everybody together. And that's what I appreciated, was having a few conversations with folks I wouldn't maybe normally have had a conversation, saying, hey, I listened to this. Like, you did? Well, thank you.
Yeah.
So thanks to those that did take the time. But it was more fun for us, I think.
It was a lot of fun.
It's just fun to sit and talk about music and that mutual.
And for Lance and I, we had it easy. Dave's the one that did all the work.
Big time. We've said that
your
before.
fair share of work.
But that was kind of the thing. It was like, okay, we'll do the thing, but Dave, you're going to have to run the show.
Yep. Dave's the producer.
You're doing everything. You're producing, you're editing, you're
running the board.
You're doing social media, you're doing the album work, all that stuff. So kudos to you.
Suppose we owe you a
you
little
did all the
something.
work, no doubt.
Appreciate that.
So thank you. And you did it. Sounded professional.
It really did. Yeah, it really does. And looked
three guys
professional
like this.
too.
Yeah, it was like the real deal.
Tried to clean us up a bit. You know?
You did.
Yeah.
You know, some artists don't get big until they're either departed this world or, 10 years later. So, this is going to live on forever. So who knows? Maybe we're in our rocking chairs at the nursing homes. Somebody will say, hey, I listened to the When Records Rule
You're
podcast.
one of those When Records Rules guys, aren't you?
Podcast.
Huh? What?
I listened to it via the chip implanted in my head. It just goes directly to my...
right.
How did you guys used to record those back then?
Sit down, let me tell you.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Huge thanks to you guys, co-hosts. It's been fun. Thanks for agreeing to help create this podcast and for sharing your love of music. It's been a great ride. Thanks also to our good friend Benji Eniger for loaning his talents for creating our intro outro music you hear every single episode.
And being an awesome guest on one of the episodes.
Yep.
Yeah.
Our one and only guest.
Yeah. Maybe if we would have had a few more.
Who knows? And for all our fans and listeners, know that we appreciate each and every one of you for listening, supporting, and interacting with us, and for joining us on this journey. It's been a fun ride. Brian, one last time, take us out.
Oh, boy. We've kind of established that we're definitely not professionals.
Correct.
But what we are is just three guys who like talking music.
And we will continue
We will.
to talk music.
No doubt.
You just won't hear it.
Yes.
But if you see us, like I said, come and engage us. We would love to talk music with you too.
Definitely. Thanks for listening, everyone. We'll see you.
See you later.
Signing out.